Right now, you're watching this video through the advancement of technology. You're on your phone, your tablet, or some kind of device that connects you to the outside world. But what if one day you decided you'd had enough? No more social media, no more internet, nothing. All gone, back to the way it used to be. Would you do it? Could you survive? I just finished reading The Way Home by Mark Boyle. This was a memoir written by a man who decided that he wanted to rid himself of technology for short term at first, but then it became a lifestyle. I read this book via Audible, which is where I found out about it. Somehow I was on Amazon, probably buying another book or something like that, and I saw the graphic for the book, and then I read the description, and it made me want to read it. I'm fascinated by people who decide to eschew technology in any way. Those who don't have social media accounts, those who somehow have a very limited digital imprint, I think it's fascinating in the year 2026. Now, of course, we know the Amish still exist. They are very much representative of a whole people group who do not use technology by and large. There are other people groups, cultures, and tribes and nations out there that have limited or no technology as well. This particular gentleman happened to live in Ireland, a place that I've heard wonderful things about, but I doubt that I'll be able to visit. In the book, he goes right into why he decided to disconnect from the world of technology. After reading the book, I saw somewhere online that someone said it reads like a diary or a journal, and I would agree with that. In fact, it's really hard not to see the book like that because he talks about how he had to handwrite everything since, of course, he had given up all forms of technology. And so that's what you would do with the journal. We take a notebook with a pen or a pencil and write out our thoughts. That's what Mark did with this book. Now, ultimately, toward the end of the book, he does explain how he had to go back to technology in order to get the book where it could be published. But overall, he wrote the manuscript by hand. What he described in the chapters on his life while he disconnected from his community, all that he known, and went into the wilderness, essentially, was something like watching someone describe living in Little House on the Prairie, if you're old enough to remember that show. I think these kinds of stories are refreshing because we need to challenge ourselves to look at how much we rely on technology. And while there are so many advancements that are incredible that we've gotten through technology, it's helpful to remember that we didn't always have these things, and generations function for centuries with, if you will, primitive types of lifestyle. Now, I will say it was almost hard to get through this book simply because I wasn't a real big fan of the narrator's voice. And anyone who reads audiobooks understands that liking or enjoying the narrator's voice is essential to reading the book. There are plenty of people who will stop an audiobook because you can't stand the sound of someone's voice. And quite frankly, I get that. Most times I've been able to muster through voices that I didn't like initially and was able to get through the book because the book was so interesting, but it's only probably less than a handful of times, and this would be one of them. The fact that it was set in a foreign country also added to my enjoyment. This is a place that I will never, ever visit, more than likely. Like I said, more than likely I won't visit. Yet and still, I was able to connect with Mark on a human-to-human level. There is definitely graphic details about how he transitions from his life in the modern day times to the life living in wilderness and having to depend on the land. He wasn't alone the whole time, though he does go on to explain his relationships and how his relationships changed during the course of his time living in the wilderness. I think one of the most interesting aspects was his transition from being a vegan to having to go back to eating meat and being a hunter-gatherer, if you will, because that was the only way he could survive his time out in the woods. Some of those scenes where he described catching game and what he had to do in order to eat that game kind of reminded me of movies like The Revenant or series like American Primeval, where things get really, really graphic and they show how animals were slaughtered, and some are still slaughtered like that today, obviously, because again, not everybody lives with modern technology. So some people are still using the methods that Mark had to resort to as everyday life. Those kinds of aspects can be harder to listen to if you're squeamish about hearing of the slaughter of animals. Likewise, you have to imagine that when you cut yourself off from modern conveniences like running water, electricity, those type of things affect how and where you live. So he lived in a cabin and they had to live, once again, in camping style, if you will, extended camping style. So he had to get creative about how to relieve himself, how to dispose of those things. And again, it can get pretty graphic. But that also makes his experience very authentic because he's a human being who had to deal with those things. And you have to even take those kinds of considerations on when you set out for an experience like this. This book is for people who like to read memoirs and who like to read stories of people who are just not like themselves at all. I, a Black American woman, am definitely not like this Irish older white man who lived in the woods by choice for years on end and continues to. Our paths will never cross, but I have read his story and was fascinated by it enough to tell other people about it. I believe this is what reading is all about. Opening your mind, expanding your understanding, your knowledge, perhaps something that will challenge you, again, to look at yourself, to look inward. For me, the draw was the lack of technology. I must admit, despite the fact that I have a daily interaction with social media in some form, I do enjoy the days when I have not been on social media and I've been so distracted living that I haven't worried about what other people are saying on the internet. I've taken hiatuses over the years from different apps. I've taken breaks altogether, and it is a sort of reset and cleansing so that you can pretty much understand where social media should or does fall in your life. So doing that as often as possible is, I think, healthy and necessary and advisable. But I know I wouldn't be able to go as extreme as Mark did. Number one, I'm not big on outdoor camping. Like, I've never been camping. I've never been like in the woods. I haven't even slept in my backyard. It's just not who I am. It's just not something I can do. I do like being outdoors, and I wouldn't mind hiking and seeing mountains and the different vistas that are out there that are beautiful, but I don't think I could sleep and or live in those conditions for too long. As a matter of fact, you can remove the word think. I know I couldn't do it. And it isn't necessarily even just about the disconnect from the technology or the modern conveniences. I'm just not built for that. Even glamping is not attractive to me. However, that said, we know that sometimes circumstances may happen that you might have to do something that you were not willing to do. In fact, many shows, modern shows, are built on some kind of apocalyptic incident happening. Hello, paradise. And people having to resort back to the way things were long, long before we had all the advancements in technology that we do now. So books like this, to me, fall in that category. What would you do? Could you survive if you had to till the land, if you had to become resourceful and one with your environment? I think it's a healthy exercise to think about. But let me tell you, this is not something that is to be taken lightly because this man explains how incredibly hard it was to understand the sacrifice he had made and to be committed to that sacrifice in order to even get a book like this written. He did have support, which is major. And he did ultimately find a lifestyle that he can live with. It brings to mind the young man that I saw online who is walking from Philadelphia to California. People do extreme feats for reasons that are truly only known to themselves. Now, he's using technology in order to spread his story, and that's great. And I wish him the best and safety, pray for his safety and all those things. But that's something I couldn't do either. I think stories like this put a mirror up to our face and say, what could I do or what am I willing to do to see major changes in my life? Now, if you were here for the Way Home review, this is pretty much where it's going to end. And I'm going to segue into The Midnight Train by Matt Haig. And that's because I kind of see a tie-in with these two stories, believe it or not. The Midnight Train is part 2 of The Midnight World by Matt Haig. I read The Midnight Library a few years ago and absolutely loved that book. That book was about a woman named Nora who found and discovered some magical library where she was able to choose different endings, if you will, and go into different timelines to see how her life would have evolved if she made certain choices. The book was so well written, and I also listened to it via Audible, which was a great choice for that book because I was able to be captivated into the story, and I think it added to my enjoyment. So when I saw that Midnight Train, the follow-up, was coming out, I was very excited to read it because I had so enjoyed Midnight Library, and I was really interested to see where else he could go with this kind of concept. Unfortunately, Midnight Train is not hitting the spot like Midnight Library. The book for me reads like any other movie that you've ever seen about someone who dies and is able to see their life after their death. Where Midnight Library was able to take someone through their life in a way that they were still alive and they were able to see different choices and different outcomes, Midnight Train deals with life after death, which I think makes sense for the universe, the Midnight universe that Matt Haig is creating. However, I just think the story falls a little flat. And this is a first for me because I haven't finished reading it, but I'm pretty solid in my review of it and my feeling about it. I do plan to finish reading it, but I don't think it's going to elevate my rating much. Midnight Library, I would give 5 stars. If I were doing reviews back when I read that, that would have been a 5-star with no problem. Glowing recommendation. I really enjoyed the book. Midnight Train, however, it gets about 2 stars. The audiobook gets 3 stars because the narrator is very good at the accents, especially when he has to differentiate between where he is. Sometimes it's an Irish accent, sometimes it's an Italian accent. He's very good. So the audiobook gets a 3, but the overall book gets a 2 from me. The good news is that it hasn't turned me off from Matt Haig books. I intend to read The Life Impossible because I want to see how he writes outside of this Midnight universe. Just to have a different experience, I'll probably read that on Kindle since I've listened to the other 2. I might decide to get the audiobook. I just don't know yet, but it is on my list and I have, I guess, measured hopes for it, if you will. The wonderful thing about reading is actually you can never be truly disappointed. If you don't like a book, you do not have to finish it and you certainly don't have to read it. You are in control at all times. So if something doesn't tickle your fancy, put it aside and move along. These 2 books couldn't be more different, but for me, I was able to see a link between reviewing them in the same video because what Mark did in his book is something that is almost conceptually what happens in Midnight Train. The character is constantly looking at his past, looking at what happened in order to see if there's something that can be different. And Mark resorted to past ways of living in order to see if his current life could be different. Maybe it's just me in my view trying to draw parallels where they're not, but it made sense to me to give you my review of each in this one video because I do see it as basically life and what life means here and now versus how you would live your life in the hereafter. Let me know in the comments if you read any of these books. The Way Home by Mark Boyle, Midnight Library by Matt Haig, or Midnight Train, also by Matt Haig. If you're going to read the Midnight Universe, definitely start with Midnight Library. It is book 1, and you should definitely start with that story so you can understand the progression and see what I mean about why book 2 didn't necessarily shape up to book 1. But it's just my opinion. Read it for yourself so you can know for you. Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can see when I drop these reviews and check out what you've missed on the channel. And I will see you in the next video.